When you find yourself in crappy times, it sucks. It sucks because you're not enjoying status quo, you're not enjoying the present moment. At least physically, you can't avoid that. It is what it is. This is where you are, and nothing much you can do about that. But mentally, you can control the mental aspect. Just because presently you are not your strongest or you're not in a good space for whatever reason, you can still put yourself mentally in a different spot. For the last 24 to 48 hours, I've been kind of reminiscing about the good times. Simply go into the journal, look at the day-by-day breakdown on what I did, and just gawk at the freaking amount of work I was getting through. Unbelievable the amount of weight I was moving 2-3 times a week, doing AMRAP sets, chasing it like a madman. Very, very impressive. And so now that I'm in a situation where I'm failing 180 for one, like, my God, isn't that a representation of how far I am? Of hitting 180 for 10 twice, 3 times a week to now failing on 180 for one. But the one thing that I took a lot of pleasure from is this mental exercise of simply going back and reviewing that time and just trying to kind of pick apart of what were the driving factors behind that success, what made me feel good, and just simply reminisce and analyze the situation from afar. And just keep telling myself that I can and will go back to that same spot of strength and performance. Is just I need to allow the body to do its thing. The one thing that kept popping up off the page, as I was reading and also reminiscing and igniting some of those thoughts from before, was simply the realization of the importance of the upper body when it comes to the squat. That's something that I wrote about a lot, and it was kind of highlighted in bold, how much of an impact that thought process was. So basically, the moment I started doing AMRAP sets, I realized that there was these patterns that were forming of how I was failing. We can always go back and say, oh, look, the good morning squat has got everything to do with weak quads, so you got to hit more weak quads. But what we fail at first to realize is that there is a natural order of failing when it comes to the squat. In fact, many other movements, but let's talk about the squat. The first man to collapse is not sometimes visible. The quads fail, the glutes fail, and we go into this like knee valgus vertical shin pattern where we go from like a really, let's say, relatively speaking, upright, strong, stacked squat to a good morning where you kind of start to resemble a deadlift pattern. And so, it's very easy to say it's the quads. The quads couldn't handle the heat, and so they left the kitchen. But what we fail to sometimes realize, and that happened to me for freaking many years, is that, yes, okay, the failing is always going to look as though that good morning pattern. But what was the first thing to fail? Ask yourself that question. And when I was doing the AMRAP sets, it became very, very evident to me what was actually going on. I kept failing in my upper back. I was getting such pumps and pains in my rear delt upper trap area that I was unable to keep my elbows back anymore. And I was essentially starting to zip open or unzip that posture, that stacked, locked in back rack. I couldn't tolerate it anymore. And so that starts to deteriorate. Then you have thoracic rounding. And then straight after that, you have these compensations that happen downstream, which eventually leads you into this like rounded over, very posterior dominant squat. And so when I made that assessment, I thought to myself, okay, let me do some rows, barbell, dumbbell. Let me do some dumbbell lateral raises. All of these things to kind of address that upper trap, lat, rear delt area. And the moment I started doing that, I found myself, I was lasting longer in the AMRAP sets. And that's basically how I eventuated into a 180 for 13, that was a big part of it. That was a really, really big part of it. Now, at first it seems, what does your upper back got to do with the squat? You know, when you just do a quick once over kind of thought about it, but there's actually huge involvement of the upper back. And, you know, I started doing 60 kilo rows, and a lot of people are like, dude, you can do a lot more. Hell yeah, I can do more. I can probably do 120 kilo rows. But the thing with rowing is that it's on a continuum. Continuum of strict form. So yeah, at 60 kilos, I can control the weight and I can really focus on the upper back portion of work. If I start to put on 2 plates, 2.5 plates, then it starts to really transition into a leg drive, lots of body English. And while that is also effective and has a place, I always found that if you start to transition into that type of movement, it becomes not an accessory, but it becomes a main movement. Doing Woolham rows or Cohen rows where you're really like yanking the shit out of it and using your whole body, that's no longer an accessory movement. That is you could probably replace the deadlift with that movement. And I never wanted to be that. I wanted to be a bodybuilding type of movement where it's very strict. And so 60 kilos doesn't seem like a lot, but I definitely feel it and I get wrecked by it. I do underhand for 3 sets, overhand for 3 sets, and then I did some 20 freaking kilo dumbbell rows, single arm rows. And after I go through the barbell, that also taxes me out with 20. So you feel that upper back really lock in. You really feel the pump. And it does, as I've experienced firsthand, it does translate to the squat. Now, we all have different variations of what fails on us and our movement patterns and our weaknesses and our leverages and whatever. But for me, there's been definite value in me doing upper back work. So while I am in this big sty of current form, I might as well start to pick apart some of the successes that I had in the past and start to work on that. Clearly, I'm far away from my performance, but I can still try and address some of the pre-analyzed weaknesses that I had. So sometimes the squat is not just about how heavy can you push with your legs. It's about the other stuff. And the other stuff is often overlooked, and I'm definitely a victim of that. Just simply overlooked it. But the value in having a really, really strong upper back under weight is hard to measure, but I definitely feel it. And I've had success when I've addressed it earlier this year. So I'm going to try and do that. Now that I'm not AMRAPing, I'm not doing anything, I'm just freaking existing in the gym. Maybe I can even up the frequency of this maybe to 2 times a week or something like that, where I just come in and barbell row away. I think it's a good idea. Appreciate you guys like always, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.